Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I don't know where you're watching from. So hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of JamTalk. For those who don't know me, I am Rachel Dolstein. I am the Task Force Chair for the Jamaica Diaspora Worldwide Organization Task Force. So normally I have the logo behind me so that I don't have to say the whole name all the time, but we call it JDWAT. So we'll be using JDWAT through the course of this interview. But I don't have the logo behind me tonight for this episode because I had to change up technology and the laptop I'm on was just not allowing me to be great. So you usually see that the logo behind me, but tonight you are not, or this morning or this afternoon, whenever you're watching us. But no worries, today's interview is going to be just as inspiring, just as amazing as all the other interviews that we've had over the course of the last year and change. Today, I want to welcome Dionne Gordon. Hey, Dionne.
Hi, Rachel. Good to be here.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. So let's get right into it. So Dionne, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are from in Jamaica, and the organization, and what is your role in this organization?
Sure. So hi, everyone. Glad to be here. Rachel, thanks for having me on again. I was born and raised in a small fishing community called Old Harbor Bay in St. Catherine, Jamaica. That's on the south coast of Jamaica, for those of you who are not familiar. And that's where I spent most of my childhood, raised in a typical Jamaican family, your grandmother's around the corner, aunts and uncles around. And I used to, from a very young age, be very involved in the community, with students in the community, myself as a student, advocacy and trying to make sure that kids have access to technology and equipment is something that's always been near and dear to my heart. When I left Jamaica, I, went abroad and pursued a career in finance, specifically in financial technology, and spent many, many, many years working on Wall Street. And now I'm in the cryptocurrency industry. I'm in that space. And so the organization that I'm talking about today is actually one that I've been heavily involved in from inception to where we are right now. And we work very closely with the Worthley Home for Girls in Kingston, Jamaica. And about 2 years ago, we started a massive drive to start to get technology into that home. It's a girls' home for young women who are coming from very challenging situations in their personal homes. And the home is a safe haven for them to get an escape from that situation, get consistent access to education, and 3 meals a day, proper, safe boarding for themselves in this course of their lives. So 2 years ago, we reopened a magnificent computer lab at the Worthley Home, and we didn't know at the time how important that was going to be because COVID came shortly after. So on the heels of that, we were able to keep at least 22 girls fully connected, fully online during the course of the pandemic, access to the internet, access to like high-speed computers so that they could continue their education. So it's a really important thing that we're discovering now throughout the course of the pandemic, how critical it is for us to stay digitally connected. And we've been able to do that for the Worthley Home for Girls. This year and coming up in September, we're planning on expanding that a little bit more to continue to add access to technology to these spaces so that children, homes who are providing a safe haven for children in challenging circumstances and with economically challenged households can have access to technology. So tech is near and dear to my heart, and we know that how students perform in traditional households and in households like a place like the Worthley Home, there's really no difference in the people's talent, in the kids' talent. The difference is their access to the technology. And so we want to give these girls and boys that same opportunity to learn at pace and to be able to keep up with the traditional spaces. So that is our objective.
Oh, cool. So I don't know if I missed it, and I definitely don't want anyone who's watching to miss it. What's the name of the organization?
It's called Waterbearer. And that's the name of the organization. People can reach out to us. We're just up and coming, but I care more about the impact that we're having And thank you for allowing us this platform to talk about what we do. But we're called Waltabera, and Rachel, I'll share my contacts with you so people can reach out and find us and get in contact with me and my other colleagues who work closely on this project.
Perfect. Okay. So you talked about what you guys have done so far, especially in the pandemic, in trying to keep young people connected. And we know that one of the things that came out of the pandemic is a huge digital divide between low income communities and school. So there were so many children who were not able to fully access school because they did not have the devices to do so, or the school systems did not have the funds to provide for them. So that is actually amazing. So what made you decide to get involved with this particular organization?
Sure. So many years ago, when I passed my common entrance, I'm really dating myself here.
Well, you don't look dated.
Oh, honey.
Oh, that's all that matters.
Many years ago, when I passed my common entrance, my grandmother, who was very active in the Anglican Church, I used to live in Old Harbor. So I used to wake up super early in the morning, take 4 modes of transportation just to get to Immaculate, which is on Continental Spring Road. So I would wake up, I would take a taxi from Old Harbor Bay to Old Harbor, then another one from Old Harbor to Spanish Down, another one from Spanish Down to Halfway Tree, and then another one from Halfway Tree to Spring Road. And
that's 4 buses? That's 4 buses.
4, 2 taxis, 2 buses. Wow. So that took from like 4 a.m. in the morning, I was up, I had to get to school by 7:45, right? And so I was up traveling from the wee hours of the morning. And my grandmother, who had friends all over the Anglican diocese, knew a woman who ran a boarding facility in Kingston. And a portion of the Worthley home at the time allowed commuters like myself to board. And so I know the Worthley home inside out because I spent many semesters there boarding to go to Immaculate. So I used to trek across the road and go right across to Immaculate and back to the home. So I witnessed firsthand the experiences that kids who are coming from non-traditional homes had as they were growing up, and that I made many friends, lifelong friends with whom I work with still closely to this day through the Worthley home. So it's a cause that is absolutely near and dear to my heart and will always be.
And that's one of the special things about doing these interviews is, as I've interviewed folks, I've learned that so far everyone who has either started an organization or joined an organization did so because of some childhood influence. So either it was their parents who was influential in some way in this arena. It was your grandmother who connected you to this boarding home. And then as you got older, just appreciation for what was, what you had, or even gaps, what you didn't have. You had the opportunity to be a blessing until you turn back around and you kind of lean backwards to help someone else. So that is one, for me, that's one of the most heartwarming parts of why I do these interviews is to learn that the folks I interview are connected to this organization in intimate ways. It's not a random, like, oh, I just want to do something good. It's very intentional and very specific. So
yeah, for sure.
Wonderful. Yeah, yeah.
Sure. I spent many hours commuting, and so when it was totally taxing on you, and you do that 2 ways every single day, and after a while, everybody, my parents realized, my grandma realized that there's no way I was going to be able to compete with the other kids who were from Kingston and live around the corner. So their intent was to give me the best shot at my education, and so that's how I ended up going over to the Worthley home to spend a couple of years of high school there to board. So it's certainly a critical part of my own development as a human being, and just being able to connect with people from all walks of life and understand life in a real way at a very young age.
That's awesome. Awesome. So I know in your introduction, you talked about what I would say is one of the organization's accomplishments, which is being able to support these 22 girls throughout the pandemic, because we know the pandemic has been so taxing not just organizations, but individuals, et cetera. So the ability that this organization had to do that. You know, when I started my organization, we had a board member that would say we're small, but we're mighty. And so I never shy away from small organizations, but sometimes they're the ones doing the most impactful work. So you're small, but you're doing mighty work, your influence. I mean, 22 girls is absolutely amazing. So, you know, the flip side of that is that obviously there are challenges to the work that's being done. So what would you say is one challenge that the organization is having now that the diaspora can support?
Sure. I think it's a great question. And we want to be a force multiplier, right? We know we can't do this alone. We know we are one entity, and we know that the needs are far greater than our own capacity. So we want to be able to replicate what we've done at the Worthley Home all across Jamaica, in communities where specifically where people are vested, where our model is not to newspaper charity, where you go, you drop off a piece of this and you invite the paper to come, you take some photos and it ends up in the paper, and then boom, you're gone again. We're vested advocates. We want people who have an organization that they're personally invested in and want to maintain that connection. And so we're looking for partners all across Jamaica with stories like mine, stories like yours, who have an institution, a boys' home, a girls' home, any kind of refuge home that allows young children who are in desperate situations in their household to have a place to stay and get access to education. We want to be able to support those causes, because these are the kids invariably in our society who get left behind in a real way, right? And a lot of the young girls and boys in these places are extremely bright, they're promising, they've got a lot of hope, and more importantly, no worries. At the end of our mission too is to make sure that the girls and boys understand that there's an obligation to give back. So we have a very Janus approach where we look forward and we look back. So we want to be connected really quickly with partners across the country who are who have access or who are vested and interested in working in homes like this, so that we can start to build a network across the island of partners who want to access technology, because of where I work and what I do, I've got great partners in the US who are willing and able and want to do projects like this. But we don't want people to come and dole out and disappear. We want people who are invested. We want them to stick around. We want them to become board members. We want them to have after school programs with the kids. We want them to spend their time, not just their money, but most importantly, their experiences, and share with the kids. And we're very much an integrated model. We're not interested in just dropping and going. Like, the most important thing you could give to a child is your time.
Correct. Oh, cool. So this is a really powerful ask. I think that what you're asking is so important, because a lot of us will give money and not our time. And that time really is valuable. And I know in the business world, they say time equals money. But honestly, when it comes to children, especially children who may be living at a boarding home as you did, and don't have daily access to their parents or even daily access to other vested adults, it's so important to have that. We know how important mentoring is to kids growing up, positive role models that are males and females. So I think the ask of time is a powerful one, because I found that, sometimes that ask can be the hardest for people to give. They'll give you a couple bucks or they'll help you fundraise, but the time. So
yeah, I personally found, we were having a conversation now, I personally found that kids need consistency, right? I've mentored maybe 20 kids in my lifetime so far. I know I told you I took common entrance, right? I mentored about 20 kids in my lifetime, not at the Worthley Home. These are just kids in my own community where I grew up, and saw many of them through different phases of their life, through university and so on. And the one thing that they have shared with me as feedback is the fact that there was consistency and repeatability, and that gave them a safety net, not in capital or resources, but just a person to come back to talk to vent, to discuss issues, to talk about challenges and obstacles that they have had, because they've had parents in their lives who are in and out the door, right? And having that stability has been such a crucial part of them knowing that they've got a safe space, a psychologically safe space to come and discuss issues with, or just talk through things. Because a lot of times the kids just need someone who they can talk to, and we can't discount that. And I've taken that feedback to heart, and understanding that anything that I'm going to be building in the future has got to be based on the two-way feedback that's coming back from the kids, because they're the ones that we're doing this for and not ourselves.
And I'm really, glad that you're leading by example in that, because so many times we ask, as leaders, and I'm saying we, not pointing by that, but just collectively, we may have an ask as a leader, but it's an ask that we ourselves are not demonstrating or not modeling. So I'm happy and grateful that you are not just, understanding the importance of consistency, on importance of kids having the time, on asking for folks to do that, but you're demonstrating it with your own example of how you interact with the kids and how you live your life in the work that you do with this organization. So that makes an ask even easier in some cases to fulfill, because folks know you're doing it, right? You're not just asking, but you're also investing your time. You're being consistent. You're showing up when they need you to show up, not when you want to show up. But when they need you to show, when it's important for you to be there for them, you're showing up. So I think that's one of the most important parts of, I think, leadership when it comes to the nonprofit space, is consistent leadership, consistently being there. Have you found that that's the case as you've been kind of doing this work?
Yeah, I mean, what you represent in a child, especially in a volatile household, is like every child in that situation dreams of having stability. That they'll tell you all the time is that they look to their peers, they look to other kids, and they start to compare their situations because they're looking to understand how the world works and what's normative. And they quickly discover through just, observing that something is very different about my circumstance, or I'm not, measuring up to somebody else at school for one reason or another. So I'll give you an example. I had one of my kids, he was trying to get onto a football team, right? And the coach wanted to talk to all of the parents just to talk about the requirements for joining the team and the consistency that would have been required and the gear that they would have needed and so on and so forth. He didn't have anybody to represent him in that moment in time, right? And this is a kid who his mother was away. His father is not in the picture, to be diplomatic. And so all in that moment for him to be able to get access to this thing that he's dreaming of, which is to join this team, is a person, literally a warm body, to take a phone call to represent him, because parents are an extension. The kids will see either their mentor, their guardian, or their parent as a representation and an extension of them somehow. And all he needed was that person to have a phone number for the coach to call. And I had to be mom for a day. And I was like, absolutely. These are the things that we're going to do. And we're going to make sure he gets there on time, and he's going to have his supplies and And he was able to luckily join the team, not just because of that phone call or that presence. He's got real talent, and he was able to stay on the team because he is demonstrating his ability to be on that team through his talent. But sometimes it's really simple things like that. Or a kid wants to apply for something, a grant or a scholarship, or they have forms that they need to complete at the doctor, and they're intimidated by these very, very simple things that sometimes even intimidate me as an adult. You have to fill out forms, and you really I hate doing it. But simple things like that, just having somebody, one who's literate, able to interpret and understand what could be a confusing set of paperwork to go through for whatever reason, really easy things like finding a JP, and their children, they don't have advocacy and agency in their community to be able to pick up the phone and call an adult and say, hey, we need to get this done. So it's being able to be that kind of presence for them in real practical ways to help them move the needle when they're aspiring to do things.
And, I'm sitting here and I'm like, man, I wish I couldn't identify with the whole concept of parents showing up and how important, or an adult, because in this case, a parent may not have been able to show up for whatever reason the case may be, but having that village and in spaces and in places where children cannot have a village, that we create that for them as Jamaicans, born out of the soil of Jamaica, born in that land, that we make it our business to, no matter where we are in the world, is ensure that kids still have that village. As you're talking, I'm just thinking back to my own life as a kid and how many times I felt that, that you have an opportunity and there's no one showing up, or they need to have a parent. When I went away to college, first day, it was a boardaway college and everyone else had a parent there. I had no one. And that feeling of just show up. You don't have to give just being there to show up so you can say, this is a representation of me, my village, my support. So that's, I think, what you're doing, as I think many of the organizations work that they're doing is also soul work. It's not just work around providing kids access to education, but you're building self-esteem, you are building courage, you are building dignity, you are validating dignity, that their life matters. And I call that soul work. So the work is not just, in the physical, but you're really pouring into souls, things that will have an impact on them when they become adults. And I'm just sitting here like, man, I can resonate with my little football friend.
Yeah. I had a kid who was lucky enough he's talented again and was able to join the track team, and he went to the Penn relays, and we weren't sure if he was going to be able to make the races because coach wasn't sure about who he was going to start. And listen, I got in my car and I drove all the way into Pennsylvania that Saturday afternoon.
Yeah,
let me tell you something. He's got people. So, and we be coming to the stadium. So make sure that what does he need? He's on the track, and is he making sure also too that the kid is holding up their end of the bargain. But sometimes just the act of being there and that your presence really helps the other adults recognize that, as you said, it's kind of valuable and he means something to someone else. And therefore I've suddenly ascribed value to him.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely. Oh my goodness, this is really good. And I know we can go on for like hours and hours on this, but I want to shift a little bit as we kind of gallop towards the end of the interview. So I want to pivot a little bit to leadership and talking about your journey as a leader in learning about yourself and in this particular space. So what is one lesson that you have learned from being a leader in this organization?
Wow, it's a great question. If I could share a lesson that somebody else imparted on me, right? Not necessarily one that I've learned, but one that I've tried to practice, and feedback that I received is to do the job that you imagine in your mind. Start practicing that work now. So if you want to be a CEO 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, you have to start practicing the work of a CEO now. If you want to be a great mentor, you start practicing now. You don't arrive at these places without time and hours logged, right? And conceptually, obviously that makes sense once you hear it, but I don't know that I was necessarily practicing that throughout the time when I was having these concerns or struggles, or how do I deliver this message, or how do I inspire this person, or how do I, help someone transition from one phase of their life to another. It's all about, you mentioned it before, living what you want to become now. And so that is something that I try to demonstrate daily in my own practice of leadership. I don't even call it leadership. I call it becoming, right? Because we're all becoming. And so that is one thing that I think about quite often, and I'm consistently refining what it means to become, and therefore the practice is always there. It's a self-improvement. And I will also add to that the ability to take constructive feedback and sit and listen in that construction. And so, and the kids know, but here's the thing, the kids will ground you quick and fast.
Oh, real quick.
Quick and fast. You know you are doing your job or not, because the impact is real and the stakes are very real. Right? It could be the difference between one of your kids getting involved in some gangs, or it could be the difference between early unplanned teenage pregnancy. It could be the difference. So it's literally life and a better life. Those are the two options. Right?
That's absolutely true. My mom used to tell us to dress for where you're going, not where you're coming from. She used to tell us that, and I think has some Jamaican something to it, but she had all these little wisdom quotes she used to tell us. But I remember that, and you're right. When they say that, you're just like, okay, what does that even mean? Because at the time we were extremely poor. How am I even going to dress? But it's not physically. It's getting your education, learning what it's learning what you need to learn. It's developing those skills, that attitude, that mindset that prepares you for where you're going. And it wasn't until I was much older that it kind of clicked together, one, because I was older. So the idea of introducing that to children as young as possible and connecting it for them, not just telling them, prepare for where you're going, dress for where you're going, but what does that mean? What does that look like when I'm 5, when I'm 10, when I'm 15? Like, what does that mean? Because I'm living in abject poverty, where I don't know where my next meal is coming from. I may only have one piece of clothes. So how am I going to visualize this? What are you talking about? I think the idea of really connecting that for young people and having them understand what that means in real life, not just, I'm just telling you this to inspire you.
Yeah, not abstract, it's real.
Yeah, it's real. I think it's so very important to the work that you're doing. So absolutely. So what is one thing you've learned about yourself?
Do we have time?
One thing. Gonna make it fast.
One thing that I learned about myself is a capacity. Some days I don't think I can, it's in me, or I've got, but somehow, some way you find that extra gear when you're working from a place of real passion and real interest. I couldn't imagine, right, overcoming the things that we've been able to overcome. And it's hard to fathom that you have that much capacity. So it's a reminder to me to share that with kids also, that capacity is inside of them as well.
Awesome. And I think that's a really good lesson that most leaders learn, because capacity, not just what you can do, but it also points to self-care. Like, you have to understand when it's time to tap out, when it's time to say, I've reached what I can do right now, whether it's mentally or physically, and not push yourself beyond that point. So I think that's a really valuable lesson to learn, especially early on in leadership journey, the fact that the idea of capacity and what that means in the work that we're doing, and that we honor ourselves when we understand and know what our capacity is, and we set those boundaries. And it's good to model for kids too, right?
100%.
Yeah, and I think a really good example of capacity is a grandma who understood that there's no way you could travel get up so early, take 4 different vehicles to get to school twice a day, and still have the capacity to be able to study, get enough sleep, and all that stuff. So I think that was probably, listening to the story, I don't know if it was your first lesson, but I think that was probably a very early lesson in what you're talking about right here, is that somebody saw that, understood that, and addressed it. The best 100%. Way is to have her stay here. And that may have meant she doesn't see you as often, but you're giving you the better chance by modeling for you, managing that. So that's amazing. And it's so important a lesson especially for you young leaders out there. I was young once. You think you do everything.
You take common entrance.
And then when you reach our age, you realize, and I'm not gonna age myself, even though I am enjoying getting older, but that's a whole nother life. All right, so how can Jamaicans in the diaspora, and we have folks who are watching from around the globe, how can Jamaicans in the diaspora get involved with or support the work that you're doing?
Sure. So at risk of like putting my personal email out there on blast, what I think I'm going to do is once we are up and running and our site is up, I'll share that with you, and hopefully we'll be able to have a rejoinder where people can reach out to us, because right now we're just operating from personal inboxes and doing the work that we're doing. And we're getting ready again to unleash that capacity that we have to be prepared to receive all of the grace and goodness and work and the support that I know we're going to get from conversations like this and others pretty darn soon.
Awesome. So if you are interested in learning more about this organization, you can just leave a comment that you're interested. We're going to gather all those comments and we'll make sure that Dionne and her team gets them, so that when they have their website or when they have their communication up and going, they can reach out. So just you can leave a comment or you can message. You can send us a message as well to let us know that you're interested in getting more information about Watabera.
Yes, Watabera. You said it exactly right. You can say it with a Jamaican pattern.
Yes, Watabera. So leaving a comment will probably be the easiest. Just leave a comment to let us know. If you can leave your email address in that comment too, that would be great. That way we can kind of, Dionne and her team, when they're going through the comments to see who's engaged and to engage with you in the comments after you've watched this or while you're watching this, they can kind of gather information and be in contact with you as well. You can also go to jdtan.org and send us an email, send us a message if you are interested in connecting with Dionne and Watabera. So Dionne, thank you so much for joining me this evening. I'm glad that we were able to talk about everything that we wanted to talk about. I definitely have some connections that I need to help you make in listening to what you're doing, that I'll be happy to help you make as you continue this work that I think is so very important. Thank you for talking to us about you and the wonderful work that you're doing with kids via the Watabera. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Rachel. It was lovely to be here. Thanks for your time as well. Thanks for having us on.
No problem. So thank you guys so much for tuning in for another episode. You know, I always say I'm a wannabe talk show host. For another episode of JamTalk. Have a good morning, have a good afternoon, and have a good evening. See you next time. Bye.